I'm Samantha Mitchell, 32 years old, and I've always been the family disappointment. My investment banker father, socialite mother, and corporate lawyer sister made sure I knew it. That day at the luxury car showroom for Heather's birthday should have been different. I arrived in an Uber, hopeful but nervous, while my husband Nathan finalized a business deal. I had no idea their mockery would escalate to publicly humiliating me, or that karma would arrive in the form of a Rolls Royce. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And hit that like and subscribe button as I reveal how my family's smiles vanished when they realized who my husband really was. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut meant expectations were sky high from the moment I was born. My father, Richard Mitchell, built his reputation as a cutthroat investment banker who valued status above all else. My mother, Eleanor, perfected the role of socialite, chairing charity events not out of compassion, but because it positioned her in the right social circles. And then there was my sister Heather, 2 years older and seemingly perfect in every way. Sam, why can't you be more like your sister? Became the soundtrack of my childhood. While Heather brought home perfect report cards and trophies, I brought home art projects and creative writing assignments that were met with tight smiles and quick changes of subject. Art is a hobby, Samantha, not a career, my father would say, not bothering to hide his disappointment as he placed Heather's academic awards prominently on the mantel while my art contest certificates went straight into a drawer. One particular memory stands out from when I was 13. I'd won first place in a statewide young artists competition. Instead of celebrating, my mother had frowned at the paint beneath my fingernails before a dinner with her friends. Couldn't you have chosen something a bit more distinguished? She'd asked, gesturing vaguely at my hands. Heather was already preparing for debate competitions at your age. By 18, the family expectations were clear: attend an Ivy League school, pursue a lucrative career, marry strategically, and continue the Mitchell legacy of wealth and social prominence. Heather followed the script perfectly: Yale undergraduate, Harvard Law, and now a senior position at one of New York's most prestigious law firms. I chose a different path. After high school, I attended a state university on scholarship to study art education, a decision that caused my father to not speak to me for nearly 6 months. Teaching finger painting to children, he'd sneered when he finally acknowledged my career choice. What a waste of potential. What my family never understood was that I found joy in creativity and helping others discover their own talents. After college, I secured a position as an art teacher at a public school in New Haven. The salary was modest, but the work fulfilled me in ways that chasing status and money never could. It was at a community art center where I volunteered on weekends that I met Nathan. He'd come in to donate supplies, high-quality paints, canvases, and easels that our center desperately needed but couldn't afford. I noticed him immediately, not because of his generosity, but because of how intently he studied each student's work, asking thoughtful questions about their techniques and inspirations. "You really care about this," I'd said to him, surprised by his genuine interest. "Art saved me when I was a kid," he'd replied simply. "Everyone deserves that chance." We started dating shortly after, and I fell in love with his kindness, intelligence, and the way he valued people for who they were, not what they owned or their social standing. When he proposed after a year, I said yes without hesitation. We had a quiet ceremony at the courthouse. Just us and a few close friends, none of whom were my family members, who declined to attend what my mother called a hasty and imprudent union. What my family didn't know, what I deliberately kept from them, was that Nathan wasn't just some ordinary guy who donated art supplies. He was Nathan Reynolds, founder of Reynolds Technologies, who had sold his software company for billions just 2 years before we met. He lived comfortably but modestly by choice, driving a Tesla for everyday use rather than flaunting his wealth. "Why don't you tell them?" Nathan had asked more than once. "Maybe they'd treat you differently." "That's exactly why I don't want to tell them," I'd always respond. "If they can't accept me for who I am without the trappings of wealth, then their acceptance means nothing. For 3 years, we'd lived our lives largely separate from my family. Nathan respected my decision to maintain distance, though he made it clear he'd support whatever relationship I wanted with them. We'd focused instead on building our own happiness, working on education initiatives through a foundation Nathan had established, traveling to places we loved, and creating a home filled with warmth rather than pretension. But when the invitation came for Heather's 34th birthday celebration at an exclusive luxury car showroom in Greenwich, something in me still yearned for that familial connection. Maybe, just maybe, enough time had passed that things could be different. "Are you sure you want to go alone?" Nathan had asked that morning as I prepared to leave for Connecticut. "I can reschedule the investor meeting. You've been working on this deal for months," I'd replied, kissing him goodbye. "I'll be fine. Besides, I think it's better if I go by myself. Less complicated." As the Uber approached the showroom, my stomach tightened with a familiar anxiety. Part of me still hoped that today might be the day my family finally really saw me, and accepted me for who I was. The other part braced for the inevitable disappointment. Little did I know just how badly things would go, or how dramatically they would change before the day was over. The Greenwich Luxury Automobile Showroom was exactly the kind of place my family would choose to celebrate Heather's birthday. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a gleaming collection of the world's most expensive cars, their polished surfaces reflecting the afternoon sunlight. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and Aston Martins stood on rotating platforms like mechanical sculptures, each with a price tag that exceeded what most people earned in several years. I smoothed the front of my simple navy blue dress, professional and tasteful, but certainly not designer, and took a deep breath before pushing through the glass doors. The interior was even more opulent than it appeared from outside. Marble floors, ambient lighting, and the subtle scent of leather created an atmosphere of exclusive luxury. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers, providing a refined soundtrack for the wealthy clientele browsing multi-million-dollar vehicles. A sharply dressed attendant approached me, his expression shifting from eager assistance to polite dismissal as he assessed my attire and lack of visible status symbols. "May I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting I might be lost. "I'm here for Heather Mitchell's birthday celebration," I replied, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Recognition flickered across his face. Yes. The private event is in the Platinum Suite, through those doors and to the right." I thanked him and made my way across the showroom, acutely aware of how out of place I felt. The Platinum Suite turned out to be a sectioned-off area with its own bar, catering staff, and a stunning view of 3 particularly exceptional vehicles: a limited-edition Bugatti, a classic Rolls Royce Silver Ghost, and the newest Lamborghini model. The room was already half filled with guests, my parents' friends, Heather's colleagues, and business associates my father was undoubtedly hoping to impress. My mother spotted me first, her perfectly maintained face registering surprise before settling into a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Samantha," she said, air-kissing both my cheeks. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Happy birthday to Heather," I replied, attempting to start on a positive note. "Yes, well, she's over there with your father. They're discussing which car she might select. Her firm's bonus this year was substantial." The emphasis on the last word was subtle but unmistakable, a reminder of my sister's financial success compared to my modest teacher's salary. I made my way toward my father and Heather, who were engaged in animated conversation with the showroom manager beside the Lamborghini. My father's hand rested possessively on the car's hood as if he already owned it. 770 horsepower, the manager was saying. 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. There are only 20 models available in North America this year. "Sounds perfect for my girl," my father replied, his voice carrying that distinctive tone of pride he reserved exclusively for Heather. "Nothing but the best for the youngest senior partner in her firm's history." Heather noticed me hovering at the edge of their conversation and raised a perfectly groomed eyebrow. Sam, you actually came. She was stunning in a red designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. Her dark hair styled in an elegant updo that highlighted diamond earrings that glittered with each movement. Wouldn't miss it, I said, offering a small gift bag containing a handmade bracelet I'd created specifically for her. Happy birthday. She took the bag with 2 fingers as if it might contaminate her. How thoughtful. I'll open it later. The gift bag disappeared into the hands of her assistant, a harried-looking young woman who hovered nearby with a tablet. I strongly suspected the bracelet would never make it out of that bag. Richard, darling, come meet the Andersons, my mother called, waving my father over to a couple I didn't recognize. They've just purchased a summer home in the Hamptons near the Whitakers. My father excused himself immediately, not bothering to acknowledge my presence. Heather's attention was already diverted to a group of colleagues arriving with expensive-looking gifts, leaving me standing alone beside the Lamborghini. For the next 30 minutes, I attempted to join various conversations only to be subtly excluded. When I approached a group including my mother, she would suddenly remember someone she needed to introduce to someone else. When I tried to engage with my father's business associates, he would materialize to steer the conversation toward Heather's accomplishments. Did you know my daughter argued before the Second Circuit last month? Youngest attorney in her firm's history to do so. I was never my daughter in these introductions. I was Samantha at best, my other daughter at worst, and my profession was never mentioned. I retreated to the bar, ordering a sparkling water that I sipped slowly while watching the social dynamics I'd grown up with but never mastered. The practiced laughs, the strategic conversations, the constant jockeying for status. It was exhausting just to observe. First time at one of these events? Asked a kindly older gentleman who had settled beside me at the bar. No, I admitted with a small smile. Lifetime attendance, actually. That's my family. Ah, he said, his eyes following my gaze to where my parents now flanked Heather as she held court near the Bugatti. Not your scene. Never has been. I'm an art teacher. His eyes brightened. My granddaughter loves her art classes. Most authentic part of her education, if you ask me. Our pleasant conversation was interrupted by Heather's voice, suddenly louder than the ambient noise. I'm thinking the Lamborghini for city driving, but the Aston Martin would be perfect for weekend trips to the Cape, she announced, champagne flute in hand. Daddy, what do you think? Why choose? My father laughed, the indulgent sound I'd never once heard directed at me. You deserve both, princess. The showroom manager looked delighted at the prospect of a double commission. We could certainly arrange a package deal. Perhaps a test drive of each? As keys were produced and attention focused on Heather's potential purchases, I felt increasingly invisible. I considered leaving, surely no one would notice, but something kept me rooted in place. A stubborn hope, perhaps, that just once I might be included in my family celebration. That hope was about to be thoroughly crushed. I was contemplating whether to get another sparkling water when my father's voice cut through the ambient chatter, startlingly loud and directed unmistakably at me. Samantha, I'm curious, he said, his tone making it clear that what followed wouldn't be kind. Why did you bother coming today when you clearly don't belong in this environment? The conversations around us faltered and died. Heads turned. My cheeks burned as I became the sudden focus of attention in a room full of strangers and distant acquaintances. I came to celebrate Heather's birthday, I answered, keeping my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. Celebrate? With what? He continued, gesturing dismissively at my simple dress and lack of expensive accessories. You didn't even bring a proper gift. That little bag probably contains another one of your craft projects. Before I could respond, my mother glided to his side, her social smile firmly in place though her eyes were cold. Richard, darling, perhaps Samantha could make herself useful while she's here. She turned to the showroom manager. Do you have any cleaning supplies? My daughter is quite good with manual tasks. The manager looked uncomfortable but produced a soft cloth from his pocket, the kind used to wipe down the vehicles. My mother took it and extended it to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Here you are, dear. At least you can contribute something to the occasion. My hand trembled slightly as I stared at the offered cloth. Was this really happening? In public? The humiliation was so calculated, so precise in its cruelty that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Mother, I'm not here to clean cars. Well, you're certainly not here to buy one, Heather interjected with a laugh, pulling out her phone. This is perfect for my Instagram. When worlds collide. The teacher and the supercars. She snapped several photos of me standing there with the cloth still extended toward me, capturing my mortification for her thousands of followers. I glanced around the room. Most guests had the decency to look uncomfortable, but no one intervened. Some even smiled behind their champagne flutes, enjoying the spectacle of the Mitchell family drama. This wasn't the first time, of course. There was the college graduation dinner where my father had spent the entire meal discussing Heather's law school acceptance while ignoring my cum laude honors. The Christmas where my mother had forgotten to put out my stocking. The family vacation photos where I was positioned at the edge, easily cropped out for the versions that went into frames and holiday cards. But this was different. This was public humiliation, orchestrated and deliberate. The showroom manager, to his credit, looked troubled by the scene unfolding in his establishment. He stepped forward slightly, as if considering whether to intervene, then seemed to think better of challenging the wealthy clients currently discussing multiple high-end vehicle purchases. I stood frozen, torn between the lifetime habit of retreating from my family's cruelty and the growing certainty that I deserved better than this treatment. Nathan's voice seemed to echo in my mind. You don't have to keep subjecting yourself to this, Sam. You're worth so much more than how they treat you. The cloth remained suspended between my mother and me, a symbol of everything wrong with our relationship. Take it and accept the role they'd always assigned me, the lesser daughter, the disappointment, the one who didn't belong. Refuse it. And finally acknowledge that perhaps some family ties weren't worth preserving. Honestly, Samantha, my father sighed in exasperation, if you're not going to make yourself useful, perhaps it would be better if you left. We wouldn't want you to embarrass yourself further. Embarrass myself? I repeated, the words barely audible. You've always had a talent for it. My mother added with a small, tight smile. Not everyone is meant for our world, dear. There's no shame in accepting one's limitations. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. Even Heather had lowered her phone, though I had no doubt the photos she'd taken would be uploaded with some cutting caption the moment I left. For years, I'd tried to tell myself that their treatment of me was simply their way of pushing me to succeed on their terms, that somewhere, beneath the criticism and dismissal, was love. Standing in that showroom, the pretense finally collapsed. This wasn't tough love. It was simply cruelty, dressed up in designer clothes and social niceties. Too cheap to even sit in these cars, let alone buy one, Heather said loudly, performing now for her audience as she gestured toward me. But that's always been your problem, Sam. No ambition. No vision. Content with mediocrity. Each word landed like a physical blow. 20 years of similar comments had conditioned me to absorb them silently, to retreat into myself until the moment passed. But something was different today. Perhaps it was the public nature of the humiliation. Or perhaps it was 3 years of building a life with someone who valued me for exactly who I was. Whatever the reason, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet, steel-like resolve replacing the familiar shame. I think it's best if you leave now, Samantha, my father said, not bothering to lower his voice. Before you embarrass us any further. Richard is right, my mother added, still holding the cloth between us like some bizarre offering. This clearly isn't your scene. You were never meant for our world. I looked at my mother, really looked at her and saw not the intimidating figure of my childhood, but a desperately insecure woman whose entire identity was built on appearances. I looked at my father and saw not the titan of finance, but a man who measured human value solely in dollars and status. And I looked at my sister, who had learned from both of them that cruelty was acceptable if dressed in enough designer labels. "You're right," I said finally, my voice soft but steady. "This isn't my scene. And I'm grateful for that every single day." The unexpected response caught my mother off guard. Her perfect eyebrows arched in surprise. "I don't measure my worth by the car I drive or the labels I wear," I continued, addressing not just my family but the entire room. "I measure it by the students whose lives I've touched, by the genuine relationships I've built, by staying true to myself despite a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough." "Oh, please," Heather scoffed, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Spare us the inspirational teacher speech. We all know you're just jealous." "I'm not jealous, Heather. I'm sad for you." The truth of this statement surprised even me. Sad that you've never known the freedom of being valued for who you are rather than what you own or what you can provide. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "That's enough," he snapped, moving toward me with purpose. "You've made your point. Now leave." "I was just about to," I replied, turning toward the exit with a dignity I didn't know I possessed. My father wasn't satisfied with my voluntary departure. He gripped my upper arm firmly, not enough to hurt, but enough to assert control, and began steering me toward the door. "Always had to make a scene," he muttered. "Some things never change." The physical manhandling was the final indignity. I pulled my arm free as we reached the entrance to the showroom. "Don't ever touch me like that again," I said quietly, for his ears only. "And don't contact me unless you're ready to apologize for how you've treated me, not just today, but for my entire life." He looked genuinely shocked, as if the idea that I might establish boundaries had never occurred to him. "You're being ridiculous." "No, I'm finally being honest. There's a difference." With that, I pushed through the glass doors and stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight. Standing alone on the sidewalk, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was hurt. Of course, the wound of family rejection never quite heals, no matter how expected. But underneath the pain was something unexpected: relief. The relief of finally speaking my truth after years of silence. The relief of no longer contorting myself to fit into a world that was never designed to include me. I took a deep breath of the fresh air, fighting back tears that weren't entirely from sadness. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my family. It hadn't changed them, but perhaps it had changed me. As I reached for my phone to call an Uber, I noticed a sleek black car approaching in the distance. Not just any car, a Rolls Royce Phantom, gleaming in the sunlight like a dark jewel. I knew that car. I knew who would be inside it. I watched as the Rolls Royce Phantom approached, its distinctive silhouette unmistakable even from a distance. The investor meeting must have ended early, or perhaps Nathan had sensed I might need him today. Either way, the timing couldn't have been more perfect or more dramatic. As I waited for the car to arrive, I reflected on why I had tolerated my family's treatment for so long. There had always been the childish hope that if I just tried harder, achieved more, or found the right words, they would finally see me, accept me, love me unconditionally. But standing there on the sidewalk, having finally spoken my truth, I realized the painful reality: they might never change. And more importantly, I no longer needed them to. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Almost there. How's it going?" I hadn't told him about what had just transpired. There would be time for that conversation later. "For now," I simply replied, "better now that you're coming." The purr of the Rolls-Royce engine grew louder as the vehicle approached, even to my untrained ear. It sounded different from ordinary luxury cars, deeper, more refined, emanating power without needing to announce it loudly. Rather like Nathan himself. Several passers-by stopped to admire the approaching vehicle. Rolls Royces weren't uncommon in Greenwich, but Nathan's was custom, a deep midnight blue that appeared almost black until the sunlight hit it just right, revealing sapphire undertones. It had been a gift to himself when his company went public. The one truly extravagant purchase he'd allowed himself, despite his billions. The car glided to a stop directly in front of me. The uniformed driver emerged and nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Reynolds." He greeted me, using the name I'd taken professionally as well as personally after our marriage. "Hello, Thomas," I replied with a genuine smile. "Thank you for bringing him." "My pleasure, ma'am." Before Thomas could open the rear door, it swung open from the inside. Nathan stepped out, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that I knew cost more than my entire wardrobe, but that he wore with the casual comfort of someone who cared about quality rather than labels. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. "That bad?" he asked softly, enveloping me in a hug that felt like home. "Worse," I admitted into his shoulder. "But also clarifying." He pulled back to study my expression, his eyes, the warm brown that had first attracted me to him, filled with concern and a hint of protective anger. "Did they hurt you?" "Not physically," I assured him. "Just the usual emotional demolition, but with a larger audience this time." Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only outward sign of his anger. Unlike my father, whose rage was loud and designed to intimidate, Nathan's anger was quiet and focused, particularly when it came to people he cared about. "What do you need?" he asked. A question so simple yet so profound in its respect for my agency. Not, "What did they do?" or "Let me fix this," but "What do you need?" acknowledging that the decision was mine to make. I glanced back at the showroom, where curious faces had begun to appear at the windows. The distinctive Rolls Royce had attracted attention, as it always did. Among the onlookers were my family members, their expressions a mixture of confusion and curiosity about the unexpected arrival. "I need to finish what I started," I said finally. "And I think maybe it's time they knew exactly who I am and who I'm with." Nathan nodded, understanding immediately. "Are you sure? You've always wanted to keep these worlds separate." "I did," I acknowledged, but that was when I still hoped they might accept me for myself. I see now that was never going to happen. And I'm tired of hiding parts of my life as if I'm ashamed of them. He offered his arm with a small smile. "Then let's go say hello to your family." Thomas had already attracted the attention of the showroom staff. The manager who had witnessed my humiliation earlier was now hurrying outside, his professional mask firmly in place, but his eyes widening as he recognized the car and, more significantly, its owner. "Mr. Reynolds," he exclaimed, extending his hand. "What an unexpected honor. We weren't aware you were visiting today." Nathan shook the offered hand firmly. "Last-minute decision to join my wife for her sister's birthday celebration." He emphasized the word wife slightly, his arm tightening around my waist. The manager's gaze shifted to me, recognition and confusion battling across his features as he made the connection. "Mrs. Reynolds." "I didn't realize." "It's Mitchell professionally," I supplied helpfully. "But yes, Reynolds personally." "Of course," he stammered, clearly recalibrating his entire assessment of me in real time. "Please, both of you, come in. Can I offer you anything? Perhaps a private viewing of our newest acquisitions?" "That won't be necessary," Nathan replied smoothly. "We're just here for the family celebration." As we walked arm in arm toward the entrance, I couldn't help but feel a small, petty satisfaction at the manager's complete reversal. It wasn't the reason I was with Nathan, nor was it the kind of respect I valued. But after the humiliation I'd endured earlier, the human part of me appreciated the karmic symmetry. We paused at the threshold of the showroom, and Nathan looked down at me with a question in his eyes. I nodded once, took a deep breath, and together we stepped back into the lion's den. The moment Nathan and I entered the showroom arm in arm, a visible ripple passed through the assembled guests. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Champagne glasses hovered in midair. Eyes darted between us and my family, sensing the dramatic potential of the moment. The showroom manager, who had scurried ahead of us, was now practically vibrating with nervous energy as he approached my father. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "I believe you already know Mr. Reynolds?" My father's expression was a study in confusion. "Reynolds," he repeated, looking at Nathan with no recognition whatsoever. "Nathan Reynolds," the manager clarified, his tone suggesting my father should absolutely know this name. "Founder of Reynolds Technologies. One of our most valued clients." A murmur swept through the room. Reynolds Technologies was a household name. The company's software powered everything from smartphones to medical devices. Its founder was frequently featured in business magazines and had a reputation for both brilliant innovation and ethical leadership. Recognition dawned slowly on my father's face, followed quickly by disbelief as he looked between Nathan and me. "You're that Reynolds?" "The very same," Nathan replied pleasantly, extending his hand. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Though I've heard a great deal about you from Samantha." My father shook Nathan's hand automatically, social training overriding his shock. "Richard Mitchell," he said, his business persona snapping into place. "I wasn't aware you knew my daughter." "I more than know her," Nathan responded with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We've been married for 3 years now." The bombshell landed with spectacular effect. My mother, who had been hovering nearby, actually gasped audibly. Heather's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips, her eyes widening to an almost comical degree. "Married?" my mother repeated faintly. "But that's not possible. We would have known." "Would you?" I asked quietly. "You declined to attend our wedding. You've never once asked about my personal life in any meaningful way. Why would you know?" The manager, sensing the tension but misinterpreting its cause, rushed to smooth what he perceived as a potential business opportunity. "Mr. Reynolds is one of our most distinguished clients. The custom Phantom outside is just one of his collection. The azure blue ghost we delivered last month is truly spectacular." Nathan acknowledged this with a modest nod. "Thomas is very patient with my automotive interests." "You collect Rolls Royces?" my father asked, his voice slightly strangled. "Among others," Nathan replied casually, "though I prefer to think of it as appreciating functional art rather than collecting. Each one serves a purpose." My sister had finally recovered enough to approach, her social mask firmly back in place though her eyes betrayed her calculation. "Nathan," she said warmly, as if they were old friends. "What a wonderful surprise. I'm Heather, Sam's sister." "I'm so sorry we haven't met before now." The birthday girl, Nathan acknowledged with a polite smile. "Happy birthday. I understand congratulations are in order for your recent promotion as well." Heather preened at the recognition. "Senior partner, yes. Youngest in the firm's history." "Impressive," Nathan said sincerely. "Sam mentioned you've always been remarkably driven." The conversation might have continued in this artificially pleasant vein had the showroom manager not chosen that moment to address me directly, his manner now deferential bordering on obsequious. "Mrs. Reynolds, please accept my sincere apologies for earlier. Had I known who you were..." He trailed off, seeming to realize too late that his words were making the situation worse rather than better. "Known who she was?" my father repeated, his gaze sharpening. "What exactly happened earlier?" The manager blanched, looking between my father and me uncertainly. "I think what he's trying to say," Nathan interjected smoothly, his tone pleasant but with an unmistakable edge, "is that there seems to have been a misunderstanding about Sam's place here today." "There was no misunderstanding," I said quietly but firmly. "I was very clearly shown exactly what my family thinks of me." The other guests had begun to drift closer, drawn by the undercurrent of drama. Heather's friends whispered behind their hands, no doubt processing the revelation that the sister they'd heard dismissed as a struggling teacher was married to one of the wealthiest men in the country. My mother, ever conscious of appearances, attempted to salvage the situation. Samantha, darling, you know how these family teasing sessions can sometimes get out of hand. We were just having a bit of fun. Fun, Nathan repeated, his voice still pleasant, but with a dangerous undercurrent that I recognized. From what I observed when I arrived, your daughter was being escorted out of this establishment against her will. That doesn't strike me as particularly fun. My father's face had taken on the tight, controlled expression he used when closing difficult business deals. There seems to have been a regrettable misunderstanding, he said smoothly. Family dynamics can be complicated. I'm sure Samantha understands we meant no real harm. Actually, I don't understand that at all, I replied, finding strength in Nathan's solid presence beside me. What I understand is that I've spent my entire life being told I wasn't enough, that my choices weren't valid, that my career helping children discover their creative potential was somehow less valuable than careers that generated wealth and status. The room had gone completely silent. Even the background music seemed to have faded away. That's hardly fair, Samantha, my mother protested weakly. We've always supported you. Have you? I asked, meeting her gaze directly. When have you ever attended one of my student art shows? When have you ever asked about my students or my curriculum with genuine interest? When have you ever introduced me to your friends without immediately changing the subject from my career to Heather's accomplishments? She had no answer, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. Heather, never one to remain silent for long, jumped in. This is ridiculous. You're making a scene over nothing. So we teased you a little about your lifestyle choices. That's what families do. Families support each other, Nathan corrected her gently but firmly. They don't publicly humiliate each other for entertainment. And who exactly are you to lecture us about family dynamics? My father demanded, his composure finally cracking. You've been married to my daughter for 3 years without so much as a phone call to introduce yourself. At Sam's request, Nathan replied evenly. She wanted to be accepted for herself, not for who she married or what I own. After witnessing today's events, I understand why. The showroom manager, who had been hovering anxiously nearby, seized an opportunity to interject. Mr. Reynolds, we would be honored to show you and Mrs. Reynolds our newest acquisitions in a private viewing room. Perhaps your family would like to join you. That's very kind. I answered before Nathan could respond, but I don't need special treatment now that you know who my husband is. What I needed was basic human respect when you thought I was just a teacher in a non-designer dress. The manager had the grace to look ashamed. Of course, Mrs. Reynolds. You're absolutely right. My father, ever the businessman, seemed to be recalculating his approach. Nathan, he said, his tone deliberately warm and inclusive, clearly we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start fresh? Perhaps dinner next week at the club? I'm sure we have many connections and interests in common. What we have in common, Nathan replied, is that we both know an extraordinary woman. The difference is that I recognize her value while you've spent decades undermining it. Now see here, my father began, but Nathan continued speaking, his voice remaining calm but carrying an unmistakable authority that even my father responded to. Sam is the most compassionate, authentic, and genuinely talented person I know. Her work has transformed the lives of hundreds of children, giving them creative outlets and confidence they might never have found otherwise. The foundation we established together has funded arts education in 50 underserved schools across the country. He turned to look at me, his eyes softening. She's my moral compass and the reason I still believe in using wealth and privilege for something beyond self-gratification. The naked emotion in his voice brought tears to my eyes. This wasn't for show, this was simply Nathan, speaking his truth as he always did. I don't care about your connections or your club membership, he continued, addressing my father again. What I care about is how you treat your daughter, my wife, going forward. Because while Sam is forgiving enough to give you another chance, I'm afraid I'm considerably less patient when it comes to people who hurt those I love. The implied threat wasn't physical, but it hung in the air nevertheless. In the world of wealth and business connections that my father inhabited, Nathan Reynolds had considerably more influence than Richard Mitchell ever would. Heather, ever the strategist, seemed to recognize the shifting power dynamics immediately. "We've clearly all gotten off on the wrong foot today," she said, her tone conciliatory. "Family tensions, you know how it is." "Sam, I'm sorry if our teasing went too far." It wasn't a real apology. There was no acknowledgement of what they had actually done or the pattern it represented, but it was more than I had ever received from her before. "Heather's right," my mother added quickly. "We may have been a bit insensitive. You know we only want what's best for you, darling." I looked at my family, really looked at them, and saw not the intimidating figures of my childhood, but three deeply insecure people whose entire sense of self was built on external validation. In that moment, I felt something unexpected, compassion. Not enough to excuse their behavior, but enough to see it as a reflection of their limitations rather than my worth. "What's best for me," I said gently, "is to be accepted for who I am, not what I own or who I married. That's all I've ever wanted from you. Not your connections, not your approval of my career choices. Just your acceptance that my path is valid even if it's different from yours." The moment hung in the air, fragile and potential-filled. My family stood on one side, Nathan and I on the other, with years of hurt and misunderstanding between us. Whether this confrontation would lead to healing or permanent estrangement remained to be seen. What was clear, however, was that the dynamic had irrevocably changed. I was no longer the family disappointment, silently absorbing their judgment. I was Samantha Mitchell Reynolds, teacher, philanthropist, and wife, standing in my truth and finally, fully visible. The showroom manager, still hovering nearby, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Reynolds, we would be delighted to offer you and your husband our premium client experience. Perhaps a private viewing of our limited edition models." I smiled at him, appreciating the irony of how quickly Samantha with the cleaning cloth had transformed into Mrs. Reynolds' valued client in his eyes. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary. We're not here to shop today." "Of course," he replied, clearly disappointed at the lost sales opportunity. "But please know that you and Mr. Reynolds are always welcome." Nathan squeezed my hand supportively as we faced my family. The other guests had begun to disperse, sensing that the most dramatic moments had passed, but still stealing curious glances our way. My father was the first to speak, his business persona firmly in place. "Nathan, I hope we can move past this unfortunate misunderstanding. I'm sure we have much to discuss, perhaps your foundation work. Mitchell Investments has a substantial philanthropic arm that might align with your interests." It was so predictable, immediately pivoting to potential business connections and advantages. Nathan simply smiled politely. Any discussions about foundation partnerships would need to go through our executive director. Sam and I maintain strict ethical guidelines about personal relationships and foundation decisions. My mother stepped forward, her social mask firmly in place, though I could see the calculation behind her eyes. "We should have a proper family dinner soon to welcome Nathan properly." "I can't believe we've missed 3 years of your marriage, Samantha. You really should have told us. Would it have made a difference?" I asked quietly. "Would you have treated me differently if you'd known who I married?" Her hesitation was answer enough. "That's the problem," I continued. "I wanted to be valued for myself, not for my husband's wealth or connections. The way you treated me today, when you thought I was just a teacher with no status symbols, showed me exactly what you really think of me." "You're being dramatic," Heather interjected, though with less conviction than usual. "It was just a bit of teasing. It was humiliation." Nathan corrected her gently. "And from what Sam has told me, it's part of a lifelong pattern." An uncomfortable silence fell. For perhaps the first time in my life, my family seemed at a loss for words. I don't need special treatment, I said finally. I don't need to be treated like Mrs. Reynolds instead of Samantha. What I've always needed is to be treated with basic respect and acceptance. Of course we respect you, my father said automatically. Do you? I challenged. Respect means honoring someone's choices even when they're different from what you would choose. It means seeing value in different types of success, not just financial or status-based metrics. My mother sighed dramatically. Samantha, darling, the real world runs on those metrics, whether you like it or not. Parts of it do, I acknowledged. But there are other worlds with different values. The world of my classroom, where a child's creative breakthrough is worth more than any luxury purchase. The world of our foundation, where access to arts education is changing lives in ways that can't be measured in dollars. Nathan smiled at me, his eyes reflecting pride and love. The program Sam developed for our foundation has been implemented in 50 schools across the country. The preliminary research shows significant improvements in student engagement, academic performance, and emotional well-being. Your foundation, my father said, latching onto this piece of information. I'd love to hear more about that. It's not our foundation in the sense you're thinking, Nathan explained. It's independently managed with its own board. Sam and I contribute financially and programmatically, but we've structured it specifically to avoid the pitfalls of vanity philanthropy. My mother looked confused. But surely you named it after yourselves? The Reynolds Foundation? The Creative Futures Initiative, I corrected her. Because it's about the students, not about us. This concept seemed genuinely foreign to my family. The idea of wealth that wasn't leveraged for status or recognition simply didn't compute in their worldview. The point, I continued, is that there are many ways to measure success and contribution. Teaching might not come with the salary or status of investment banking or corporate law, but it changes lives. That's always been enough for me. Heather, ever the pragmatist, seemed to be reassessing me entirely. So you've been living some kind of secret billionaire life while pretending to be a struggling teacher? That's actually kind of impressive. We don't live a billionaire life, I explained. We live comfortably but modestly. Nathan's wealth is primarily directed toward the foundation and other social impact investments, except for the Rolls Royce collection. My father noted with a hint of his old sarcasm. Nathan laughed good-naturedly. Everyone needs a hobby. Mine happens to involve appreciating automotive craftsmanship. The tension in the room had shifted subtly, not disappeared entirely, but transformed into something more like cautious reassessment. I think, my mother said carefully, that perhaps we've underestimated you, Samantha. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Eleanor Mitchell, it was unprecedented. I know you have, I replied simply. The question is whether that can change going forward. My father, ever the strategist, seemed to be calculating his response. Family is important, he said finally. Perhaps we all need to recalibrate our expectations. What I need, I said, are boundaries. I won't be spoken to the way I was today ever again. I won't be treated as less than because of my career choice. And I won't participate in family events that are just showcases for status and materialism. My mother looked genuinely alarmed. But those are all our events, she said, inadvertently revealing more than she intended. Nathan and I both laughed, breaking some of the tension. Maybe it's time for some new traditions, I suggested. Ones based on genuine connection rather than showing off. Heather grimaced slightly. That sounds terribly boring, to be honest. It might surprise you, Nathan told her. Some of our most memorable evenings have been simple dinners with friends where the only status symbol was who could make the worst pun. My sister looked skeptical but didn't argue further. We should go, I said to Nathan, suddenly feeling emotionally drained from the confrontation. We have the foundation fundraiser to prepare for tomorrow. He nodded, understanding as always. It was interesting meeting you all, he said diplomatically to my family. I hope this can be a new beginning rather than an ending. My father, ever aware of potential connections. stepped forward. We'll be in touch soon. Perhaps once the dust settles. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the towering figure of my childhood, but an aging man whose entire identity was wrapped up in external markers of success. In that moment, I felt something unexpected. Pity. That would be nice, I said, and meant it. Not because I needed their approval anymore, but because despite everything, they were still my family. Flawed, frustrating, and sometimes cruel, but bound to me by blood and history. As Nathan and I turned to leave, the showroom manager hurried after us. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, please accept my sincere apologies for any discomfort today. I hope you'll consider us for your future automotive needs. I smiled at him, feeling a new confidence that came not from my husband's wealth, but from finally standing in my truth. What matters isn't how you treat people you think are important, I told him gently. It's how you treat everyone, regardless of what you think they can do for you. He had the grace to look embarrassed. A valuable lesson, Mrs. Reynolds. Thank you. Outside, the Rolls Royce waited, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Thomas held the door as Nathan and I slid into the sumptuous leather interior. As we pulled away from the showroom, I watched my family through the tinted windows. They stood together, looking somewhat lost and confused, their carefully constructed social event derailed by unexpected truths. Are you okay? Nathan asked, taking my hand. I think I am, I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. For the first time in my life, I feel like I've actually been seen by them, even if they didn't particularly like what they saw. You were magnificent, he said, squeezing my hand. Standing up for yourself, setting boundaries. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without knowing you were in my corner. I admitted. Not just today, but every day. Always, he promised. But you're stronger than you know, Sam. You always have been. As the Rolls Royce glided through the streets of Greenwich, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Not the journey from teacher to billionaire's wife. That was just circumstance and good fortune. The real journey was from a child desperate for approval to a woman who finally understood her own worth. The luxury car we sat in was certainly nice, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. But it wasn't what made me rich. What made me truly wealthy was the freedom to be authentically myself, to do work that mattered to me, and to be loved not for what I owned or achieved, but simply for who I was. You know what I'm thinking about? I asked Nathan as we left Greenwich behind. What's that? Tomorrow's fundraiser. Those kids from the South Bronx program are showcasing their artwork, and I can't wait to see Ms. Garcia's face when we announce the program expansion. Nathan smiled, understanding perfectly why this mattered more to me than any family drama or luxury car. That's my girl, always focusing on what really matters. As the miles passed beneath us, I felt a profound sense of peace. The confrontation with my family hadn't magically fixed our relationship. Decades of dysfunction couldn't be healed in a single afternoon. But something fundamental had shifted. I had shifted, and sometimes that's where real change begins. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who didn't value your choices? Or have you experienced that moment when someone who dismissed you suddenly realized your worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own value today. Remember, true wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by how you treat others and how authentically you live your life. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.